Salutations, Crazed Kitsune here, aka Khuma'zi Tayuun, and welcome to Melee DPS for Dummies. In this video, I'm going to be giving some basic general tips for how to play a Melee DPS class. So without further ado, let's get started with a simple definition of what a DPS is. A DPS is a damage class. Their entire purpose in a party is to do a lot of damage quickly to the enemies. They're the ones who do the killing. They're very important and very useful. However, they're also fairly flimsy. As a DPS, your highest priority is to kill the tank's targets as quickly as possible in the order they want them killed. You will also need to avoid any attacks that are coming your way. If you see an AoE marker on the ground, get out of it. Don't stand inside of it. Staying inside of AoEs and taking unnecessary damage is a quick way to get yourself killed, or just rapidly deplete your healer's MP, and neither of those is a good thing. As a melee DPS, you will be in close to the enemy. For the purposes of this video, Emerald Carbuncle will be our enemy. I know, he's adorable and nobody wants to kill him. Thankfully, I'm not going to actually attack him. I'm just going to be using him for visual demonstration. As you can see by the circle around him, you can tell the direction he's facing because there's a little arrow there. And that little empty space at the back of the circle tells you that's his rear section. As a melee DPS, well, most melee DPS have what are called positionals. Certain skills that receive special benefits when used from either the flank, which would be off to the side, or the rear, which would be in behind. These bonuses are generally that they deal extra damage, though sometimes they also have additional effects, special bonuses. There is one DPS who, unless this changes after Stormblood goes live, there's one melee DPS who doesn't have positionals, and that is Samurai. The other three melee DPS do have positionals and should be doing their best to be getting their positionals whenever possible. There are some fights where trying to get your positionals is actually going to be more trouble than it's worth, and in those, it's fine to not. But in general, if you have a skill that says its combo potency is higher from the flank, you go to the flank to use it. If you have a skill that says its potency is higher from the rear, you go to the rear. You do not just stand behind the enemy spamming your skills like a dumb butt. Because then you're not doing nearly as much damage as you could be, and you should be trying to do as much damage as you can as quickly as you can using all skills available to you, while also dodging any and all attacks that come at you. Generally, most attacks will be aimed at the tank, but there will be occasions where the enemies will just have AoEs that they target randomly at someone else in the party, like you. So move. Do not let it hit you. After the AoE marker disappears, it's generally safe to step back in. There are some attacks where they do continuous damage over time in the area that was marked, but you can usually tell whether or not it's an attack like that by whether or not there's a graphic that stays active in that position for an extended period. One such example is a Conal attack generated by a certain boss. I can't remember the name of it. I think it's something like Magitech Gunship, which is actually... no. Fumbling with controls. I am amazing at this game. What are you talking about? But one of the attacks, or at least one such example of an attack like this, is the Flamethrower Conal attack used by the Magitech Gunship in Keeper of the Lake. It's a fairly wide conal that it will launch in front of itself. It aims this at the tank, so it's generally not going to be a problem for you, but you should be aware that after the AoE marker disappears, it's going to be continuing to fire it's going to be using a flamethrower type attack over that cone for a couple seconds. As long as it's spewing fire in that triangle, it's not safe to stand there. There's also a boss in the Airy who will place a circle which targets an area. That circle, when it goes away, the boss fires an attack there called Fall of Man. After the attack goes off, it creates a cloud of toxic gas that will just sit there. You don't want to step in that toxic gas. It gives you a very nasty, uncleansable poison. And those are examples of AoEs you don't want to stand in, and you don't want, and they will leave behind permanent effects. So, as a general rule, you dodge AoEs that are coming your way, and if it is safe to move back, do it. If it is not safe to stand there, don't stand there. Standing in the fire doesn't help anybody. Pardon me a moment, I still have throat issues. A melee DPS depending on the fight, sometimes the melee DPS has the harder dodging job, because some enemies have a lot more close-range AoE attacks that a melee has to worry about, and very few ranged AoEs that a ranged would have to worry about, or the healer. Now, melee DPS tend to have the highest single target damage output in the game. You're generally going to be hitting pretty hard, killing things pretty fast. Though, generally, melee DPS's AoE damage isn't that great. I mean, in large pulls, go for it. If you've got lots of enemies, do it. You're going to be getting better DPS efficiency. But as a DPS, one of the toughest things is learning what is the most efficient way to attack. How do you handle this situation? How do you handle that situation? In general, use your strongest, heaviest hitting skills whenever possible. Use your rotations. Use your cooldowns. But there will be fights where things are different. I can't explain every fight in the game because, whew boy, there are a lot of them. And some of them are pretty intense, let me tell you. But your job as a DPS is to do as much damage as you can as quickly as possible without getting yourself killed or taking unnecessary damage. Because the more damage you take, the more time the healer has to devote to healing you, which makes it harder for them to heal the tank, and if the tank dies, nobody has a good time if the tank dies. If you die, then the healer has to expend a large amount of MP to revive you, and for the next... I can't remember the exact duration of it, but the debuff weakness is applied to people who have been revived, and it's a nasty thing. 15% of your stats gone for its duration. You're doing less damage, and you're more easily killed. It's really bad to have this happen. Even worse is dying a second time and needing to be rezzed very shortly after your previous death, because then you get the Brink of Death debuff, which is 30% of your stats gone until it wears off. Very bad. Avoid dying as much as you can, please. And watch your hate. If you're getting very close to the tank's hate, there may be some problems there. And you may need to ease off a little bit to let the tank get ahead of you again. Because, especially in boss fights, you don't want to rip aggro off the tank. Because you're a DPS. You're not a tank. You don't have the health or defense to survive a tank buster attack, which is an attack specifically designed to be very painful for a tank. They will take huge chunks out of a tank. You don't have as much health as a tank. In a lot of situations, a tank buster will kill you outright. DPS is a fairly simple role overall. You kill the targets the tank wants killed. You kill them in the order the tank wants them killed. You do as much damage as you can, as quickly as you can, while dodging AoEs, so that you don't die. If you successfully do all of this, congratulations, you're a useful DPS. Hooray! If you don't, well, try to do better next time? Admittedly, a lot of things, especially if you're new to a piece of content, are going to be trial and error, learning through mistakes, unless you have wonderful people in your party who explain stuff. I am a person who, if someone says they're new, I will very happily explain the mechanics of the bosses as we get to them. I don't have a problem stopping and typing out an explanation of what you're going to need to worry about. I am more than happy to help. And I have played with many other people who are just like me. Helpful players are wonderful. Players who yell at you for screwing up a mechanic you didn't even know existed, they're jerks. Don't let them spoil your fun. Learn the fight, and you won't have any problems afterwards. But I believe I've covered the basics of how to be a DPS. Use your skills, kill things, don't die, be useful, and when you finish off a duty and you get some loot, feel free to do a happy dance if you want. Having fun is the point of playing a game. It's hard to have fun if you're struggling to get through content, so I hope I've been helpful. If not, oh well, I wanted to make this video, so I was doing it anyway. So, until my next video, goodbye.